I think the fundamental question that comes up, that pops up when it comes to running a business, and it's not just about businesses, it's also about ideas that work for not for profit basis, ideas that are focused on social impact, ideas where the primary driver is a need to improve the world without driven by a need to make money. In all of these instances, the fundamental question that determines the survival of a business, growth of a business, potential and value of a business is dollars in, the relationship between dollars in and dollars out. So the amount of money that's coming in and the amount of money that's going out, right? And dollars in has multiple areas and categories. Dollars out has multiple subcomponents and categories. And what we want to do is we want to take a look at it. Unit economics, the term itself, essentially refers to a simple question. And that question is, does the business make sense at a single transaction level? So because if you're making money for a single transaction, you will also make money for 100 transactions, and you'll also make money for 1,000 transactions, and you'll also make money for 1,000,000 transactions. But if you're not making money for a single transaction, there's a reasonable chance that you'll not make money for 100, for 1,000, or for 1,000,000 transactions. And that, I think, at a high level is the correct way of looking at unit economics. Now, to do this well, it's important that we look at what we call a single transaction model, right? So from a single transaction model point of view, what is the cost of delivering a product? That's an interesting question, Munawar. What is classified as a single transaction in case of a platform? So one leg. So let's say if a platform has two legs, if you're a matchmaker and you're bringing buyers and sellers together, if you're a matchmaker, you're bringing, workers and specialists and consultants and doctors together with their customers and clients. One leg of this transaction would constitute a transaction as far as unit economics is concerned. But then, with respect to platform, the qualifier is that when we evaluate a platform, we don't evaluate using simplistic unit economics. We evaluate it using what we call platform economics. It's a slightly more complex field, which then looks at a single transaction, but then at the platform level, the evaluation is not just on one side of the equation, it evaluates both sides. So now coming back, what's the cost of fulfilling one transaction? So the first question is, what does it cost? What does it cost to acquire a customer? What comes to your mind? When we think in terms of customer acquisition, what comes to your mind? I almost thought you'd said alliances, but that's all right. Word of mouth also works. So you're saying marketing.
Strategic alliances?
Yeah, people use that also as channels, You've heard of affiliate networking or affiliate networks?
Yes. Makes sense.
Yeah. All right. So marketing, affiliates, that's one part. Anything else other than marketing and affiliates? If you're using salespeople, sales professionals, a sales team to sell and move your product, how do you compensate them? So commissions become a second component. All right, so that's one. Now I think the second part is, what does it cost to serve the customer? So, we've agreed that it costs us a certain amount to acquire a customer, but what does it cost to serve the customer? So if, for example, if you're running a restaurant, right, and you run a ad campaign on Facebook or on Instagram, and people are sort of walking in the door and placing an order, what does it cost to serve them? So time is one element. No. Acquiring doesn't mean to serve the customer. You have to be very, very clear. These are separate areas. Acquiring is, the customers come in, but now the customer needs to be served. So he's walked inside the door, he's willing to buy, he's willing to purchase the service or product you're offering. So for example, at a restaurant, you've run a discount campaign to drive traffic to your tables, and now traffic is waiting on your tables. You need the chef to prepare the meal, you need the servers to serve the meal, you need somebody to sort of set the tables, pick up the table, clean the tables, you need somebody to process the order, process the payments, right? So it's not just one element. There are multiple elements here. This is separate from the cost of acquiring the customer, and this is separate from the cost of building or creating or crafting the product. But let's just stop here. What about the third piece? What does it cost to collect money from the customer? How does this work? So taxes is one area, and then what Ali is referring to is called the MDR. Ji Afan, boliye. Collect money from the customer if you're using cards requires separate and multiple components, and each of those components has its own cost. If you're collecting cash, there is a cash handling and a cash management cost. If you're receiving payments through IBFT or bank checks, you need somebody to reconcile them, right? So there is, we would think that, it's just money coming in, but the money coming in needs to be counted, needs to be allocated, needs to be knocked off against orders that have shipped, orders that haven't shipped, and so on and so forth, right? And then, there's a final piece, which is what does it cost to deliver the product to the customer? And this is essentially shipping and logistics, right? So when you look at this single transaction model, there are multiple subcomponents that we need to track and that we need to be aware of when it comes to the cost of fulfilling one transaction from the perspective of either serving or delivering or acquiring or collecting or settling or sharing data with customers, right? What about revenues? Would the same analysis hold for revenue? As in revenue is revenue, right? Money is money. So that's in terms of presenting, right? But in terms of a single transaction model, where just if you've broken down the cost of one transaction, how would you break down revenue? As in, is all revenue the same, or is revenue different? So the revenue question, the dollars in question deals with how, when, and how much will the customers pay. The first part of this is what will the customer pay, and this what, right? This what deals with this how much component. And the second part is when will the payment be received. So if you think in terms of let's say a typical arrangement where you're selling software. So when you go to, for example, Liberty Books and you want to buy a book, what happens? You walk in, you like the book, you pick up the book, you take the book to the counter, and you either have cash or you have a card, and you make the payment with the cash in the card. You get the receipt, they put the book in a red plastic bag, they give the book to you, and you're done. So that's simple. There is no complication there. There's some complication in the sense that, if you used a card, if there's some discount attached, then, the accounting and the bookkeeping is a little complex. But essentially, the transaction is done in there. But what if you're selling software? Especially what if you're selling customized software? And especially, if your take is you sit down with the customer, you've had this chat with him, and the customer says, okay, we start here now and I'll pay you 50% now. And let's assume that it's going to take a few months to get this done. And whenever you deliver, I will pay the remaining 50%. So in this case, what's the challenge? In this case, the challenge is that your expenses are going to be due every month. So if you have a team that's building the software, preparing the software, that team has to be paid. If you have an office, you have to pay the bills and covers everything, right? So part of the payment that the customer has paid upfront initially will cover that. But there will come a point where you would have used everything that he's paid, and now you're going to be dependent on the next 50%. And to cover this next 50%, you will have to tap into different sources. There is a mismatch, right? You can see that. There is a mismatch in revenues and expenses. You're spending the money month by month, but you're getting paid once in the beginning and once in the end. Then I think the third piece is through what channel? As in, when the customer makes the payment, how will you get the payment? Will it happen or come through an interbank fund transfer? Will it be a check? Will it be a pay order? Will they do a direct transfer? Will they do if it's an international customer, will they do a SWIFT transfer, which is a cross-border payment? Will they make it through credit cards? How will that work? What channel will come through? And then depending on which channel they're coming through, what do you get? So we spoke about MDR, the merchant discount rate. If the payment's coming through card, the deduction could be anywhere from 1.5% to 5%. And that depends on your payment processor. And then the final piece, the last and final piece is, when we spoke about the fact this customer said 50% I'll pay upfront, 50% I'll pay on delivery. What if you build everything and you take it to the customer and the customer says, oh, I've changed my mind, we no longer need this, so I'm not going to pay for it. Or I've changed my mind and this is not what we need, we want something else and we already bought it from somebody else who had it ready. So sorry, we should have let you know, but we sort of forgot. So you're out of pocket for this amount of money that you were counting on, that you're hoping, that you're expecting that the customer would pay, but that money is not coming in. So what would you do in this case? Ab kya kare? What do we do now? Be sad. Be sad is right. So yes, you have a lot of options, but I think the question that I'm trying to ask is both on the modeling side, right? If you look at here on this side, which is the single transaction model, the cost of fulfilling a single transaction, and how much and how and when will the customer pay. This single transaction model is only looking at ins and outs. The question that you have to ask yourself is, how does this work? Are there elements, are there pieces that we haven't factored in, that we should have factored in but we haven't factored in? How do they work? If you think in terms of cost drivers, what are your primary cost drivers? So if you run a services team or a products team, you need an office space and you need resources, which are developers. And then there's this question of utilization, right? What does this utilization mean? Yeah, Munawar, you're right. You can actually make adjustments. And I think we'll talk about making those adjustments here also. So my question to you, utilization wise, is if you're running a software services company, forget software services, you have an Upwork profile and you're building a site for a customer on Upwork and you've agreed to charge this customer a certain amount of dollars per hour. So far so good? Now my question to you is, if you take a lunch break for 1 hour, should you charge your customer for that time? Is that included in the dollar per hour?
Yes, sir.
Huh? Who's this?
Sir, होना चाहिए.
आप Upwork पे हैं क्या? Do you have a profile?
Or maybe.
No, but that's as an employee, right? We're talking about as a contractor when you're charging per hour. Company के साथ तो आपका arrangement है ना? For example, let's see. If you work in a month, if you work 160 hours in a month, this is the arrangement, right? That you will show up at work at 9 o'clock and you leave at, let's say, 6 o'clock, right? And you will get an hour break in between. So that sort of counts for the fact that you're doing about 8 to 9 hours a day and you're doing about 5 days, maybe even 6 days a week. So that leads up to 160 hours. Ji Ali Hamza. And your contractual arrangement with your employer is that you'll work from 9 to 5 and you will get paid from 9 to 5. Then, everything is included. So, if you come late, you're supposed to work an hour late. If you leave late, I don't think how much flexibility you may have. If you have flexi timings, then you may have some flexibility, but otherwise, no. And, it says, your employment contract will actually say that you'll be allowed an hour for lunch or an hour and a half for lunch, right? Or that there is no lunch time, or that there is lunch time is flexible, right? But that'll be stated. But when you work as a contractor, when you're charging on a per hour basis, you can't charge for that time. So for example, if I have 10 people who work with me and those 10 people add up to, their time adds up to 160 hours, how much of these 160 hours can I charge? I think best case scenario is about 100 hours. Because remember, let's say you have 20 days and let's say you have a 2-hour lunch break every day. So that's about 40 hours. And then there is basic administrative stuff. You have to get your payroll processed, get your check deposit. You have to go get fill in your timesheets, submit them, so on and so forth. How many of you are TAs? TAs, RAs, work with SRs, volunteer, work for Habib? Ji Anand.
I was answering all the TA question. I am a TA.
So you fill in the timesheet, right?
Yes, sir.
Do you get paid for all the preparation time you put in getting ready for your office hours, or do you just get paid for the office hours?
Only for the office hours.
And if you're having lunch, so if you're having lunch, can you conduct office hours side by side with having lunch? Yeah, but you see my point, right? What is my point? My point is that if you think in terms of structure, for an employer, the employer is paying for 160 hours, but from a chargeable point of view, from a client-facing billing point of view, the employer can only charge, is likely to charge, would only be allowed to charge based on most arrangements for about 100 hours of that employee's time. And then, so let's say if my cost is, let's say I pay you $3,200 a month. We've picked up this sort of random arbitrary figure so that the math is easier. So if I charge for the entire 160 hours, what's going to be the hourly rate? Divide this by this and you get $20 an hour, right? But if I'm only allowed to charge for 100 of those hours, what's going to be the hourly rate? $32 an hour. Does that make sense? Do you see what's happening here?
Total, right?
So the optics matter a great deal, right? So for example, let's say I've agreed to charge you $20 an hour, thinking that I'll be able to charge for all the time. And the first time you send in your timesheet, the customer says, I see lunch here. How can you charge me for lunch? I see travel to office. How can you charge me for travel to office? You can't charge me for that. Remove this from here. So of the 160 hours, after all the adjustments have been made, I'm only going to pay you for 100 hours. So in this case, what's going to happen? In this case, you thought you'd be able to charge 20 hours for everything, $20 an hour for everything, but that doesn't happen. You get paid $2,000 because the customer refuses to pay you for lunch. Think it from your point of view. If you're getting somebody else to build something for you, and they say, okay, we've agreed on an hourly rate, and they say, okay, now I'm going to charge you for lunch, I'm going to charge you for tea, I'm going to charge you for the cigarette smoke, I'm going to charge you this. The professional expectation is no, you're going to charge me for net time. Unless and until the contract is for a day. The contract language says, I'm going to charge you on a man-day basis. If you're charging me on a man-day basis, that says, a man-day means 6 to 8 hours of work. Between 6 to 8 hours of work. That's fine. That I can understand. Because then it's your choice how you sort of distribute and allocate those hours in that man-day. But when the rate is on an hourly basis, the expectation is you're only going to charge for net time. You're not going to charge for what we call gross time. Gross time includes your lunch breaks, your cigarette breaks, your smoking breaks, your refreshment breaks, your walkabout breaks. Even if you're thinking about the customer, in most instances, there is a bit of gray area in there that's open to discussion. Yes, so you've sort of picked up the right thing. What you want to do is you want to cover your costs, but you want to cover the costs based on what is acceptable behavior. So charging for lunch is not acceptable behavior. It won't be considered professional in the contracting world. So charging for the amount of time you spent on lunch won't work, especially if your contracting language is on an hourly basis. If it's on a man-day basis, then you're not charging on a hourly basis. You're charging on a daily basis. There's no debate. But especially on an hourly basis, you want to make sure that the rate that you charge covers all your costs, covers all your expenses. It's a loaded rate. We spoke about here, for example, we spoke about customer default. So risk of customer default is what? 10% of the customers will not make 20% of the payments. So let's say your total billing in a given year is $200,000. And let's say the average customer, let's say you have 10 customers. So that basically means that your average customer engagement size is $20,000. So what are we saying? 10% of the customer, which is one customer. One customer will not pay the last 20%. So last 20% of this would be how much? Would be $4,000. Correct? Did you follow the logic? 10% of the customers will not pay 20% of the final amount. So our total billing is $200,000. We have 10 customers, which basically means average billing is $20,000. 20% of $20,000 will be $4,000. So 10% of 10 is one customer. 1%, one customer will not make this amount of $4,000. This is the risk. We have to factor this risk. So what do? Whatever rate, whatever billing we are charging, so we'll get paid $196,000 because one customer defaults. So where will the remaining 4,000 come from? You would distribute it, you would allocate it across 9 of your customers. So if you allocate $4,000 across 9 of your customers, you will end up with something like maybe $450 per customer, roughly speaking. Does that make sense? And how would you do this? Where would you add this? You won't add this directly. You would add this to your overall bill. You might give a different name, you might sort of hide it, you might charge it explicitly, you might just add it to your overall rates to cover your cost base. So again, as I said, you have to understand something very, very clearly, that from a transaction point of view, as far as you're concerned, as far as your mindset is concerned, a single transaction model wants you to allocate and identify all the elements of costs that will flow out of the business and compare them against all the elements of revenue that will come into the business and ensure that your cost base is covered, that it's completed. Our challenge is that, let me go back to the place where I have space to write the lines. Okay, so हमारा मसला क्या है? हमारा मसला है कि when we build a product as builders and makers, what is our primary focus? Our primary focus is on technology. Our primary focus is on building. We don't think about the business. The reason why we don't think about the business is because we're excited about the act of building. We're builders, right? We're builders and makers, so we like making things, we like building things. And when we're making and building things, we don't think of all the consequences. The consequences of what? The consequences is there are costs associated with a business transaction. A default is a real cost. What you can charge or not charge a customer is a contractually defined condition. Now, let me ask you this in a different way. What is better? Is it better to not charge a customer for lunch? Is it better to not charge a customer for lunch and only charge him for net hours at $32 an hour, which is a fully loaded rate? Is this better? Let's call this A. Or is it better to charge a customer for lunch at $20 an hour and not tell him about it? So, rather than charging him for 6 hours, which is the work that you've done, you charge him for 8 hours, and you charge him, at this is about 160. Versus you charge him $30 at 32, which would be roughly about, would it be same amount? What was the number that we looked at? So we added 2 hours. So anyhow, so 6 into 32 would be how much? 3 into 32 is 96 plus 96. That'll be $192. Which one's better? Is this better or is this better? The question is option number A. You work 160 hours, and of this 160 hours, you only work for the customer of 100 hours, but you charge him the full 160, right? And हमने जो rate निकाला था, the rate that we'd used was $20 an hour. So the customer doesn't ask you for an itemized bill, so you just charge him the exact, 8 hours a day, at $20 an hour, which gives you about $160 a day. Right? This is option number 1. And in this, you know for a fact that आपने 2 घंटे काम नहीं किया है. You know for a fact that contractually you're not supposed to charge for this. And all that's going to that is standing between you and disaster is for the customer to ask you for an itemized breakdown, and for the customer to take a look at how you're billing it to him, and he'll come back to you and say, when do your people start, when do they finish, and are you charging me for lunch? And you say yes, or you lie outright and say no, right? But in your heart you know that this is not correct, that you've misrepresented. Compare this with B, where you know that you only charge for 100 hours, but rather than charging $20, you're going to charge $32. And you're going to charge him for 6 hours rather than 8 hours. So in this specific instance, 332 is 96 plus 96 is $192. Professionally speaking, is option A better or option B better?
Sir, I think definitely option B is better.
Munawar, the challenge is, you have to honor your contractual terms. If you play hooky, if you cheat, there are moral consequences and an ethical debate around that, but there are other challenges. When you get caught, that's going to go out and create significantly larger and much more difficult issues. B. 32 is B. If you're not allowed, if contractually you're forbidden to charge for lunch, you cannot charge for lunch. A is not a valid option. I'm giving it to you because I want to understand how you've read this, right? But if the contract forbids you, or the contract doesn't say, or if the understanding is that you will not charge for extra hours, it's like, we gave the example of Habib, right? If you're a TA or an RA, you're not paid to, so for example, I don't get paid an excess amount or an extra amount for the office hours. It's part of the contract. Now I can say, I'm not going to hold office hours. The TAs will hold office hours. I will only do the classes. But would that be fair to you? It won't be, right? And that's the understanding. So there is a professional commitment, there's a professional understanding that we will behave within the stipulation of the contract that has been designed in this specific instance. All right? So that's one part. I think there's a second part here, which comes a little later, which is, in addition to utilization and resources and office space, we also have commissions. So if you're paying people to sell on your behalf, it's possible that you've paid them a certain amount in salary, but it's also possible that you're paying them commissions. Then there's the cost of distribution, which is making sure that your product reaches wherever it needs to be, where customers can pick, can buy, can purchase and acquire it. Then there's servicing. And the servicing is what? Servicing is essentially, if you've sold, let's say, 1,000 units of your product, you have 1,000 customers, and let's say 10% of those customers come back with a query, which is about 100 customers. And these queries are what? These queries are, my password is not working, this is not the right file, I think I'm missing a file, are you sure this is the right file? I've been charged double the amount. So rather than one transaction, I'm showing 2 transactions in my credit card statement. Can you please process my refund? Or I like this book. I wish you had something else in this area. Do you have something else in this area? Can you please guide me where I can find this material? I'd like to arrange a TV interview for you because I'm so impressed by the book that you've written. These are all customer queries, right? Somebody has to read those emails and answer them. So how long does it take you to answer 100 emails? Even if you super sharp, even if it takes you just a minute to respond to every email, and that's saying a lot, that's about 100 minutes. That's about, an hour and a half of your time. And if you don't have the time, then somebody else has to do it on your behalf. And there's a cost attached to that. So that comes under servicing. And this is, just basic support. There's more complicated support. System's not working. Day end's not working. Day end hasn't happened. Day start hasn't happened. The machine is not booting up. It's giving me this error message. The numbers are not matching. The numbers are not reconciling, right? That's also support. There's a cost attached to that. So you have to provide that support. You have to add that. But when was the last time, when thinking about an idea, you actually went through all of these elements? अभी आप सब लोगों ने you all did the business model canvas exercise, right? Did you fill that in? Do you have this level of depth in your cost structure? And I don't want to make you feel bad, but it's not about being right or wrong. It's mainly about you want to create this checklist that gives you a sense of what's coming in and what's going out. And to do a good job on that side, you have to be very, very comfortable. You have to be very, very diligent. You have to be very, very careful with respect to what you count as cost and what you count as income and revenue. Let's take a look at another example. I think this is something that you'd relate to. I think we ran this in the morning session, and we had an interesting response to it. What's the cost of a PS5? So $500 is the maximum retail price. So MRP, maximum retail price for a PS5 is $500. What's the street price in Karachi? If you wanted to buy a PS5 tomorrow or tonight for sort of like a surprise birthday gift for your younger brother or your younger sister or a cousin or a friend, what would that cost? 154. So say let's about $1,000, right? So MRP is $500, but the street price for a PS5 in Karachi is $1,000. Now think about this. Think about the logistics, right? So if you're a carrier, right? If you're a KPR who's going to sort of pick, who's going to fly to Dubai or Qatar or Bahrain and pick this. Let's not even say one. Let's say this guy will pick up how many PS5 do you think will fit in a bag, in a suitcase?
I think maximum 3 or 4.
Let's go with 4. Let's say I can fit 4 PS5, right? So I have 4 PS5 fit in a suitcase, and if I look at this margin, right, so it's about $500. So 500 here, 500 here, 500 here. That's about $2,000. Is this a good deal or a bad deal? Because I'll pick 4 PS5. I'll pay, how much would I pay? I'd pay about, say, $2,000 for them, and I'd bring them to Karachi, and then I'll sell them for $4,000. So $2,000 and $4,000. $2,000 का मेरा pure profit है. Is this a good deal or a bad deal? Really? No, so we're just talking about somebody who's bringing them to Karachi, right? So this is not somebody who's who's based in, let's say, in the US or in Europe. We're just talking about the arbitrage trade that exists between Karachi and Dubai. So now think about this for a second, right? Let's say I want to do this. I want to say, yeah, teaching is tough business. I'm going to quit my adjunct faculty role at Habib, and I'm just going to go out and set up a pipeline for smuggling PS5 from Dubai to Karachi, right? Let's say I do that. So क्या क्या मेरे खर्चे हैं? So let's think. Right now, if I want to fly to Dubai, there is my visa cost for going to Dubai. Then I have to get a test done before I leave Karachi, before Emirates will let me fly. When I land in Dubai, I have to get another test done. I have to be in quarantine for about 10 to 12 days, maybe even 14 days. And then, before I fly back to Karachi, I have to get yet another test done. So 3 tests to ye ho gaya, right? So Karachi is fine. Karachi, the first test in Karachi is okay because, that's about maximum $35. But what's the cost of a test in Dubai? I don't know. It's certainly not going to be $35. Possibly going to be a lot more expensive than $35. We'll find that out. Let's assume for a second. Let's say it's best case is $50. So $100 और निकल गया. So that's about $135 in tests. Achha, I don't know what the visa fee right now is for Dubai. but it used to be about 9 or 10,000 rupees. Let's assume it's another $100. So now we're going to put the kharchas here, right? So visa is one, which is $100. Your COVID tests is about, let's call it $150. So that's $250. Hey, there's my ticket. So again, I don't know, I haven't flown for a while, but my guess would be कि कुछ नहीं तो 50,000 रुपए का टिकट तो होगा. 50,000 रुपए is, let's say, about $250. Okay, then I have to stay in Dubai for about 10 days or 12 days. And even if I'm staying with a friend or a cousin or a family member or a relative, or even I'm really cheap ass a hostel accommodation, I still have to feed myself. So even if I eat 2 shawarmas a day for breakfast, lunch and dinner, that's about 30 dirhams. Let's make it 40 dirhams, right? 40 dirham a day into 10 days is 400 dirhams. That's about, let's say, $120. Okay. Then there is fare. So either I use the metro, or I use a taxi, or I use a bus. And let's assume for 10 days moving around Dubai back and forth, that's another $100. So up kahan tak pahunche hum? So 250, and then what was 120 was for food, and 100 for was travel. Let's make it another 250. So $5 ye nikal gaya. When I bring it into Karachi, right? How do I get by customs? I either pay duties or taxes, whatever that amount percentage is. Let's assume, for the sake of argument, let's assume that duties and taxes at customs are about 20% of PS5. So if they're 20% of PS5 is how much? PS5 is about $2,000 because we've got 4 of them. And 20% of $2,000 is how much? Is another $400. So $400 और निकल गए. तो अब कितने बचे? अब $900 बचे. So $900. हमारा total margin कितना था? Total margin was about $2,000. So now the bigger problem is, and this is an interesting issue, is when I bring it and sell it, unless and until I own the customers, I can't sell it for $2,000 because the person who's going to sell it to their customers is also going to make a margin on top of that. And let's assume his margin on each machine is about $100. So $400 is your distribution cost or cost of sales or commission that you pay to the channel to sell the machines. So that's about $1,300. So how much is left now? 2000 में 13 से निकाल दें, $700 बचे आपके पास. $700 for what? For let's say 14 days of travel and stay in Dubai. That's about $50 a day. और अगर एक दिन में 8 घंटे हैं, so that means what? $50 a day times, by 8 is about 50 by 8 कर दें. Maybe about $6 an hour. Is that a good rate? For all the khori, all the hassle, all the issues, all the challenges. Would you recommend this as a business? When we did the math, right? The math looked very interesting. You go to Dubai for 12 days or 14 days, 15 days. You party in Dubai for 15 days. You pick up the 4 machines and you bring them back home. And you're done. And it's $2,000 free. That's how we do the math. But when you actually dig into the transaction and you look at all the sources of costs, from here to here, अच्छा इसमें अभी एक और चीज़ तुमने शामिल ही नहीं की, right? We haven't factored in the cost of money. Somebody needs to give you $2,000 so that you can actually pay $2,000 in Dubai when you pick up the machines. And it's not just $2,000. You also need another $500 to sort of live in Dubai for 14 days. So $2,500. So you go to your chacha or your uncle or your bhai or your brother or your sister, and they say, "I'll give you $2,500, but at the end of 15 days, you will return $2,750, and that's going to be my share. So 2,500 मैं आपको दूंगी और आप मुझे 2,750 वापस करेंगे. तो ये 250 भी निकाल दें इसमें से. तो अब इसमें से 700 में से 250 और निकाल दें आप. So then you're left with how much? $450. अब क्या बना रेट आपका? By 8. Now you're down to about $5 an hour. So now, I think there was a question. I'm sorry, somebody had raised their hand or asked a question, and I was unfortunately in the middle of my flow, so I missed that. अगर आप दोबारा पूछना चाहें तो आई एम हैप्पी टू आंसर इट.
Sir,
It's 20% of value, and we've just picked up a number, right? It's like, if you bring 1 plus 7 into Karachi, I think 1 plus 7 कितने का है इस वक्त? 1600 dirham का फ़ोन है और 22,000 रुपये ड्यूटी है इसके ऊपर, कस्टम ड्यूटी है. So I've just picked up a number which is about roughly about 20%. It could be higher, it could be lower. I don't know. We'll have to find out. But we just put that in as a placeholder. Okay, does that make sense?
yes. Sir.
So the same level of diligence, right? What we've done with the PS5 transaction, the same level of diligence is what we have to do when we look at a business idea. And our challenge, as I said earlier, what is our challenge? Our challenge is that as makers and builders, we're really focused, we're really excited, we're really interested in making and building. We don't want to do this bookkeeping. This is boring business. This is what we call accounting. ये accountant करेगा, ये हमें करने की ज़रूरत नहीं है. And if you keep that mindset कि accountant करेगा, ये हमें करने की ज़रूरत नहीं है, what's going to happen? You will end up making, ये तो फिर भी, this guy is a smart cookie, he's made $5. If you don't book it properly, don't account for it properly, you won't even make $5 an hour. Actually come back to Karachi and end up with a loss, with nothing to show for. So the math looks really attractive from a distance, from afar, but when you get involved in the transaction, that's when you find out what the real cost of providing a service or a book or a product to your end customer is. Now, if I told you, right, how many of you are aware of this cost basis prior to this discussion? How many have actually thought कि यार ये $500 की चीज़ उन्होंने $1,000 की कर दी है, this just हराम का पैसा है, दरख्त पे पैसे उगते हैं, ये तो जुल्म और ज़्यादती हो रही है. Was that your mindset? और your mindset was कि यार खेपियों का भी दिल होता है, उनके भी बच्चे होते हैं, उनको भी फीस पे करनी होती है, उनके भी खर्चे होते हैं. A और B? How many were in the खेपियों का भी दिल होता है? The B camp. Mostly A, right? That was a loaded question. I knew the answer, but that's okay. Costs. Costs comes in two flavors. One is what we call fixed costs, and one is what we call variable costs, right? Fixed cost is the cost that you have to pay irrespective of how things go and which direction things go in. Let me see if I can, yeah, there we go. So fixed costs are costs that you have to pay. So the way to look at fixed cost is, when did Habib shut down for COVID? When were classes suspended for COVID? So March में we were off. अच्छा आप मुझे बताएं आप एक बात. I just want to ask you. Do you think we saved a lot of money? As in, when I say we, do you think the university saved a lot of money by shutting down the university in March? Or were there costs that they had to bear? We didn't save money, right? Okay, so, for example, just because the university was off and there were no students and there were no faculty and there was hardly any people on campus, did that, and this is a really important philosophical question, did that stop the pigeons from pooping? There you go. Yeah, see, so absolutely. It doesn't matter which part of the world are you in. Doesn't matter whether there are people on campus or not campus. The pigeons are going to poop and somebody has to clean that up, right? That's one part. I think the second part, which is also an interesting part, is what do you think happened to the chillers? You think you can just shut down the chillers and sort of turn them on at your whim? Or you have to keep them running, or at least some part of them running, so that your ducting and your sort of channels sort of stay viable? You have to, yes, there we go, servicing cost. Okay. What about bijli ka bill? If the chillers are running, do you think we saved, for example, this I have an office. So my summer bill, my peak summer would be May and June, right? My peak summer bill is, let's say, 60,000 rupees a month. That's the office ka bijli ka bill. What do you think is my bill in December and January? When I'm not running the ACs, I'm not running, I'm not running the heaters. I'm not even running the fans, and because we do early days and winters, so we get to work at 8. We go home somewhere between 4 and 6. So light भी नहीं जलती. So minimum बिजली का बिल कितना होगा हमारा जब कुछ भी इस्तेमाल नहीं हो रहा in the winter months, and that's my office, right? Yeah, so you're on the money. No, not 20K. We're about 15,000 rupees. So whether the office is open or not open, whether the office is functioning or not functioning, I have to pay 15,000 rupees, right? And similarly, whether there are students at Habib or not students at Habib, Habib has to pay a bare minimum charge, whatever that bare minimum charge is, for electricity, for water, for cleaning services, for maintenance. And then you have then you also have some minimum staff, some people who are there, essential staff, right? Some faculty members, some deans are there, which basically means that you have to get the bathrooms cleaned. You have to run the faculty cafeteria. You have to provide security. So those bills are not going to go anywhere else. And then, there is the faculty cost. Just because there are no classes in March, does that mean that faculty doesn't get paid? Of course they get paid, right? They have to be paid. So what we're saying is that whether there are students in the university or students not in the universities, there are certain fixed costs that Habib has to pay. And because Habib has to pay these costs, these are fixed costs. And then some of these costs will move up and down depending on whether the campus is open or not open. So for example, the faculty cafeteria is open, but the basement cafeteria is closed. So when students come on campus, we'll turn the basement cafeteria on. So that becomes sort of like a variable cost. We've shut down most of the campus, so only the offices are running. So the chiller and cooling and heating, all of this is happening primarily in the office areas, but we're not sort of servicing any of the classrooms. We're not even servicing any of the bathrooms around the classrooms. But when students come in, then we'd possibly increase our janitorial staff, possibly increase our bijli ka bill and our heating ka bill when students come back on campus. What else? और कौन से elements हैं with respect to a campus that are linked to what you would call variable costs? That you think are linked to students on campus? Adjuncts also get paid, but they get paid on a class basis, right? On a course basis. So even though classes are not happening, we would, again, Habib was quite understandable and supportive. They gave us choices. They said, you can continue to work on your old rate, or you can sort of go to an adjusted contract. It's your choice, your call, you decide. So some picked up the standard contract, some picked up the adjusted contract, but that was okay. But again, I think the bigger question is, can you think of any costs that you would link to the presence of students on campus? Yeah, there we go. Right? So your transportation cost back and forth from campus is linked to students. So those points that you run, those buses that you run, right? The pick and drop service that you run, that's linked to student availability. So if students are not coming to campus, then those buses are not running. Whatever Habib, and again, I don't know what the arrangement is, but you could possibly look at them as a variable cost. Anything else other than this? और बताएं और क्या होगा? What else? What else is there that you would look at, that you would classify as variable cost? That's linked to presence of students on campus. Not just at Habib, but also at other universities. Right? So you spoke about HU Dukan. That's certainly an aspect. Rahim Bhai ki fries, gym, yeah, there we go. So the gym is linked to student on campus. If students are not there, then you won't use them. Library, swimming pool, very good. Hostel cost is a function. I don't know what the arrangement was, whether you were in or you were out, as in whether you're on campus or you're outside the campus, right? But you're getting a sense. There are certain elements, there are certain have to be paid costs that you have to pay, and then there are certain costs that are linked to usage and utilization. So for example, when you run a car, if I park the car has a certain amount of fixed cost. What's the fixed cost of a parked car? So parking fee, yes. Depreciation, yes. So depreciation is one. What about insurance? You've paid insurance for the full year, right? So that's covered. Parking fee, okay. Then there is also, your excise and taxation fees. Your excise tax, right? Your what's called the motor vehicle tax, right? You've paid that. That's fixed. That you have to pay whether you use the car or don't use the car. What's variable? Fuel cost. So you don't have to put petrol in the car that's not moving, right? And to some extent, you also have some choices on maintenance. So the oil change, the filter change, the car service, you have some choice, you have some flexibility. Rather than doing it at 3 months, you can possibly do it at 4 months. But not a lot of flexibility, some flexibility. Okay, so you get a sense, right? So there are fixed costs, stuff which is you have to pay, you have to fork out, and then there are variable costs. Costs that are linked to utilization, to usage, and in the case of sales, right? So now the question that comes in, when I look at, for example, if I give you a figure, जैसे for example हमने अभी यहाँ पे बात की थी, right? In the case of our PS5 Karachi Dubai circuit. In this specific case, what was the amount of money that was left after all the costs were taken into consideration that were linked to this specific transaction? The amount that was left, depending on how you slice and diced it, was between $700 to $450. So this was the contribution margin on the PS5 transaction. Amount that's left to offset to pay off your fixed costs. And then if we set $450, if we set $700, and let's say our total expenses were $2,100, right? Then we needed to sell and purchase or acquire or move or import 3 PS5. If our cost was $2,800, then we needed 4 at the margin of $700 to break even, to get to a point where there is no profit and there is no loss. And then customer acquisition cost and lifetime value of a customer. These two pieces we've already done. ये हम पहले ही कर चुके हैं, right? We've covered this before. So what I want to do next is I actually want you to walk through a very simple case study, a very short case study that illustrates these points with respect to a live case. So Maya's Closet is a Nest IO startup. They're students of mine. If you've read Founder Puzzles, if you've opened Founder Puzzles, the book that is prescribed reading for this course, the Maya's puzzle case or the unit economic case is covered in chapter 2. And the discussion that we're going to have is essentially going to be based on the material from chapter 2. So what does Maya do? Maya basically sells baby clothes. So baby and preteen, right? So baby and preteen would basically be 0 to 2 years, 2 to 4 years, 5 to 7 years, 7 to 9 years, and 9 to 11, 12 karne se. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is 1, 2, 3, 4. They basically sell clothing, accessories, shoes, books, gifts, party wear, toys to these 5 segments. And the people who buy for these 5 segments are essentially mothers. So अम्माएं कपड़े खरीदती हैं, right? And Maya's case के अंदर Maya is a startup that was founded by a husband-wife team. So Altamash and Sabine run it together. It's an online retail business. What they did was, Sabine's big thing was that I don't see the same quality material in Pakistan that I see outside Pakistan. And Sabine was a young mother. She said, if I'm going to fix it, I'm going to fix it for everyone, not just for myself. So she and Altamash, sort of flew to China, to Thailand, to Vietnam, to a number of other markets, and they identified vendors and good quality products from these vendors. And their primary focus was what we call baby, mother care, and preteen market, right? So they said clothing, school supplies, books, gifts, and shoes. And their take was, we're not going to offer everything. We're not going to sort of import in bulk in Andhi. We're just going to go out and pick designs that make sense, import them properly and formally, and then bring them on here to Pakistan. And then balance that. So, one part of their pitch, their offer, their value was the curated collection. But the second part was Altamash, right? Which was, so the curated collection was Maya's closet, and this was essentially Sabine. And then there was outstanding customer service, and this was both Altamash and Sabine. They said customer नाराज नहीं होना चाहिए, customer खुश होना चाहिए, customer should always stay with us, right? That's the idea, that's the benchmark. Very niche market, very, very niche market, right? And then they grew and they did very well, right? And they came from they had a history of family businesses, which is the primary background that they came from. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk through a sort of a more detailed example of the terms we've discussed or identified above, right? So I want to walk through the concept of fixed and variable cost, the concept of contribution margin, of break-even point, of customer acquisition, and lifetime value for customer. But I'm going to do that after the break. So right now it's 3:42 p.m. Let's meet again at 3:55. I'll be generous, so I'll give you 3 extra minutes. So 3:55 we will reconvene and we will extend and take our discussion forward. Does that make sense? Are we good? For example, I think आपने already काम कर लिया, right? You've spoken to people, you've sort of gotten a headline sense के कितने लोग हैं जो आपसे वो plant खरीदने के लिए तैयार हैं. And have you spoken to the mother so that she could possibly get maybe 1 or 2 basic products ready for you that you could possibly start selling?
Yeah.
Right? So इस केस में आपने क्या किया? आपने लोगों से पूछा कि मुझसे खरीदोगे या नहीं खरीदोगे? And then they said, हाँ खरीदेंगे. Now you want to test maybe 3 or 4 different ideas that your friend's mom can build and provide and create in bulk, and then you want to sell them. That's the concept, right? So in this case में you've shipped it as early as possible. You haven't really put any money down. अभी तक आप क्या करें? अभी तक आपसे कह रहे हैं कि आप मुझे idea बता दें. And when I get confirmed orders from these 60 customers that I have, then I'll give you a confirmed order for, let's say, 30 planters. And then you give me those 30 planters and I'll pay you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So इसमें if you're smart, you'd actually say, जो 30 लोग हैं या 40 लोग हैं जो order place करें, you take the money from them up front and you give the money to your friend's mother on delivery, so that from a cash point of view, there is no amount of dollars out of your own pocket.
Right.
Does that answer your question?
So technically we should be aiming to launch as soon as possible.
Yeah, as early as possible. So you plan for a bit, and you do look for structure that can help, and you try and see if you can avoid mistakes. But once you've gotten a sense of that structure, then the idea is to get in front. It's not a question of launch, it's a question of get in front of customers as early as possible and validate as many of your assumptions, your conditions as you can in that amount of time.
Okay.
Alright, Ji. So attendance quiz very, very quickly. There are no right or wrong answers. The only answer is the fact that you've plugged in a number and that I can use that to track your attendance. Okay. So Maya के case में, let's say the contribution margin is 30% and the average order size is 3,000. What's the variable cost per order and what's the contribution margin per order in PKR? Now all you have to do is you take your roll number, you just take the number that you have and you respond to that in the chat, and I will use the chat log for your attendance. It's 3:56 right now. You have till 3:58. Right or wrong doesn't matter. The answer matters. 358 के बाद जितनी भी एंट्रीज आएंगी वो फिर डिस्कार्ड हो जाएंगी और डिस्काउंट हो जाएंगी. बिस्मिल्लाह. अफान, हम वेरिएबल कॉस्ट कैलकुलेट करने की कोशिश करें. सो सवाल इस कि अगर माया का एवरेज ऑर्डर साइज इज 3000 PKR, 3000 रुपये, और उनका कंट्रीब्यूशन मार्जिन 30% है, तो वेरिएबल कॉस्ट पर ऑर्डर क्या होगी एंड मार्जिन, कंट्रीब्यूशन मार्जिन पर ऑर्डर क्या होगा? ये हम I'll solve this. अगर आपके अभी समझ में नहीं आया तो not a problem. I will solve this and walk you through the logic as soon as we are done with the timeline. अभी आप सिर्फ attempt कर लें. So what's the math? The math is we saying 3000 रुपए, we saying 3000 rupees is the order size. Of this, if the contribution margin is 30%, that basically means the variable cost is about 70%. So the variable cost would be 70% of 3000, which is 2100 rupees, which means that the contribution margin, the amount that is available to meet the fixed costs for Maya, is how much? Is about 900. Does that make sense? जी खुबैब.
सर ये मार्कअप और मार्जिन में क्या फर्क होता है?
सो हम जो स्पेसिफिक बात करें इस वक्त, हम बात करें कंट्रीब्यूशन मार्जिन की, राइट? देयर आर मल्टीपल कंपोनेंट्स. सो फॉर एग्जांपल, अगर आपको याद होगा, हमने बात की थी PS5 की. PS5 की रिटेल प्राइस इज $500, street price is $1000, which basically means the markup on each PS5 is $500. Correct? But then we calculated the margin for a collection of 4 PS5. The total margin PS5 collection of 4 PS5, the total margin on that transaction from shipping from Dubai and bringing to Karachi and selling Karachi was about $450, which is about, let's say, $110. So $110 was the margin on this $1,000 purchase. Does that make sense? So markup 500 था, लेकिन margin $110 था. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. मुझे बस main confusion ये हो रही थी when we talk about contribution या margin. Do we talk about gross margin या net margin?
नहीं, तो this is not gross margin. देखें, जो आपका typical structure बनता है वो होता है sales. So let's say your sales are $1,000. Then we say cost of goods sold. So for example, let's say in the case of the PS5, the cost of goods sold was $500. तो आपका gross margin कितना बना? $500 बना. सही है? यहाँ तक सही है?
सही है.
ठीक है. ये हम अकाउंटिंग लैंग्वेज की बात करें. जब हम कंट्रीब्यूशन मार्जिन की बात करते हैं तो वी आर टॉकिंग नॉट इन अकाउंटिंग टर्म्स, वी आर टॉकिंग इन टर्म्स ऑफ अ स्पेसिफिक ट्रांजैक्शन एंड वी आर टॉकिंग इन टर्म्स ऑफ फिक्स्ड एंड वेरिएबल कॉस्ट्स. And what we really want to do is the next question. Next question is if this is your margin, your contribution margin and your variable cost, what are your break-even orders and what's your break-even point? So contribution margin, the primary objective is to identify what we want to do with the contribution margin is we want to get to a stage, get to a point where you have a sense of how many orders do we need to break even. So for example, in Maya's case, and this is continuing with the Maya's closet example, let's say Maya's fixed cost per month are 300,000. Now we already know the contribution per margin per order is 900, right? So if that's the case, how many orders does Maya need to break even? And what is break even? What does break even represent? Break even represents you've covered all your variable costs. And you've also covered all your fixed costs. So this is zero profit, right? No profit, no loss. That's the point you're standing at. So what are your variable costs? Your variable costs are 2100. So on every order, you know, as long as you're charging 3000 rupees, you're covering all your variable costs. So this is covered. What is left? Fixed costs. So on each order, you're saying 900 times X, where X is the number of orders, should equal 300,000. Okay. So once again, this is another attendance quiz. I want to make sure that you are paying attention. You divide, so find out X. How many orders do we need to cover our fixed costs? And because मैंने सब कुछ explain कर दिया, तो you only have 30 seconds to respond. So you're right on the money. I think the actual number is going to be about, let's go back. It's going to be 300,000 divided by 900. So ये कट गया. And ये कट गया, so it's 1 by 3. So it's 1000 by 3, which would be 333.3, which is essentially 334. So as long as you have 334 orders, you will be able to cover all your variable costs and you will be able to cover all of your fixed costs, which will get you to this zero profit, zero loss state. Your 335th order is where you book your profit, because your variable costs are covered, your fixed costs are covered. Then this 900 will basically go towards your profitability. So going back to Khubaib's point earlier, right? यहाँ पे we were talking sales, cost of goods sold, gross margin is accounting speak that we use in accounting statements and accounting language when we present our financial statements. Variable cost, fixed cost, contribution margin in our context right now that we're using specifically, our focus is on identifying what is the break-even point and what is the number of break-even orders. So far so good? Are we clear? Does this make sense? Okay, very good. So everybody got the right answer, which is very nice. Acha ji, ab now, why is this number important? 334. Let's make it a bit more interesting. कहाँ जाएं हम? जगह कहाँ है मेरे पास दिखने के लिए? Alright, यहाँ आ जाएं. इधर आए, ये इधर है. हाँ, इधर आ जाएं. So, question to you is, let's assume it's 400 orders. 400 orders into 12, because it's 400 orders a month. 400 orders into 12, and this is the next important question, is about 4,800 orders, right? थोड़ा सा और generous हो जाए, 5,000 order ले लें. अब मेरा आपसे सवाल है, this is the question that I'm posing to you now. You've done this math that says for Maya to break even, for Maya to be profitable, right? So 330, 335, 340, 350 पे they'd be profitable. We know that, right? We're saying 400 orders. So it's 50 excess order. 50 excess order का मतलब क्या हुआ? 50 orders is 50 into 900 is about 45,000 rupees a month in profit. So they're profitable. They're covering all their fixed costs and they're covering all their variable costs, and on top of that, at 400 orders, they're generating, roughly speaking, give or take a bit, about say 45 to 50,000 rupees a month in profit, right? Given the size of Karachi as a city, given the size of Pakistan as a country, do you think it's very, very difficult to sell, to book 400 orders a month for Maya? Do you think it's a viable business? You think it's a stretch? Is it like easy, or is it like going to Mars? So 400 order तो आप कर लेंगे ना? We're saying for this business to break even, to cover all its costs, we need about 400 orders a month. And while it might take us some time to get to that point in time, right? But you know, a year, 2 years, 3 years, at some point in time, they'll get to 5,000 orders a year. And that is certainly doable. They might even get to 50,000 orders a year, right? And 50,000 orders would be what? 50,000 orders would be, say about 5,000 orders a month. Is that difficult? So 500, 400, yes, we agree. What about 5,000? You think Maya could get 5,000 orders? Yes, I agree. I agree it'll take some time, but it's doable, right? It's not impossible. It's not like saying, I'm going to go to Mars or live on Pluto, right? Or sort of build a colony outside of Jupiter. It's thinkable. A population base of 220 million, estimated middle class about 100 million, 50,000 orders, 5,000 orders a month is not unthinkable. It's not going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen now, but it's a doable goal. And at 50,000 orders a year, the infrastructure, the fixed costs, the variable cost base of Maya will change. It'll no longer be 300,000 rupees a month. It'll no longer be 30% and 70%. It'll be a different figure. We don't know what the number is going to be, but we're simply thinking, is that possible? Is that doable? Compare this with our other question, the PS5 example. If at the same time I tell you that I think I'm going to sell 400 PS5 a month, 5,000 PS5 a year at a price point of $1,200 a piece, you think that's going to work? $1,200 का मतलब हुआ almost about 200,000 rupees per PS5. You think that's doable? There we go. So you get a sense right now. What you're saying is, what you've really done, what the primary objective of introducing this framework is to get a sense, get an immediate sense of the viability of the business. Given Maya's low cost base, given Maya's respectable profit margins, Maya seems like a doable business, seems like a reasonable business, a business that you can possibly dig into and expand. But that PS5 exercise, getting 500 PS5s into Karachi, that by itself is going to be a challenge. सबसे बड़ा मसला तो ये है. Second masla is, I don't think the margins will hold if you had an abundance of supply. अभी क्या हो रहा है? What's happening now is, you get 1 unit, 2 unit, 3 unit, 4 unit, 5 units. किसी के पास 5 आए, किसी के पास 10 आए, किसी के पास 15 आए. तो जब वो आते हैं उसके हिसाब से वो निकाल देते हैं. But if there are 500 units available in the city every month, then the price will fall. It's not going to stay at $1,200. It'll most likely come back to the $600, $700, $800 price point, if that price point exists. Okay, so अब हम एक तीसरा बिजनेस ढूंढते हैं. Have you heard of Test Kitchen at Zamzama? नहीं? You know what Test Kitchen is? Test Kitchen में वो बच्चे who want to grow up, who want to qualify and practice as a chef, cook stuff. They cook all sorts of exotic stuff, and it's really, really nice. And because you're their trial customer, they sell it to you at a fraction of the price of what it would cost you to, let's say, eat the same meal or the same dish at a more expensive high-end place. Does that make sense? So here's the concept. The concept is, one of your cousins or friends or colleagues or mothers or sisters or siblings or extended family member is training to be a chef at the Test Kitchen, and she's done really, really well, and she has this amazing range of sandwiches. So she has this menu of 100 odd sandwiches, and each sandwich is to die for. But her model is very simple. Her model is, it's 250 rupees including delivery for a sandwich, single sandwich per day, and you pay for a week upfront. So 250 into 5 would be how much? 1250 रुपए. यही बनेंगे ना? If you pay 1250 rupees in the comfort of your Habib campus, your sandwich will be delivered to you by about between 11:30 and 12 noon. And it'll be a sandwich to die for. You won't get anything like it anywhere in the city. How many of you will sign up for that? 40 बच्चे हैं इस क्लास के अंदर. कितने बच्चे sign up करेंगे? 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So you've got about, let's say about 12 yes and say about 5 no. So the answer, the ratio is about 5 to 12. Let's say 4 to 12. 4 to 12 का मतलब क्या हुआ? 1/3 of the population. So now think about this for a second. There are about, roughly speaking, about 1,000 students at Habib. There may be another 250 faculty, staff, adjunct faculty members at Habib. So 1250 का pool हो गया. 1200 का pool लगा लें. 1200 का pool लगा लें. 1200 का pool हो गया. 1200 के pool में से अगर हम ये ratio लेते हैं, which is about 30%. So 30% of 1200 would be how much? 360 people. If you want to sort of acquire customers, right? You have a couple of strategies. In this class, we've taken a poll, and in that poll, I think we've gotten about we've gotten about 300. So about 30% of the class has said yes, that they'd like to try it, right? So let's say 10 बच्चे हैं हमारे पास. She doesn't do anything. You know, she gets a rider and sends 10 sandwiches over. And when the sandwiches come, you know, the packaging is nice, they look nice. When you open them up, even if you're sitting in the basement cafeteria, everybody else is having, you know, biryani or dalcha or dal gosht or chawal or sabzi or bhujia. And you get this exotic sandwich out and the restaurant is filled with the aroma of the test kitchen. And then everybody comes around and says, "Ye kya hai? Ye kahan se mila?" And you say, "Ki mera hai. I'm not going to share it." And then you start eating it, right? And then, you know, this is, you know, when you see those fancy ads and those fancy scenes in the movies and the films, right? You see that and you say, "Wow, I wish I would had that." And you say, "Cha, how do I get one?" And I just give you the number and you sort of WhatsApp the number and they say, "Okay, ये account की information है, इसमें पैसे भेजने 1250 रुपए, कल आपका सैंडविच आ जाएगा." तो 10 लोगों से कहानी स्टार्ट होती है and it quickly sort of grows and spreads like wildfire across the entire campus. So इस case में, what's the acquisition cost? No, think about it. Did she pay anybody? She didn't pay anyone, right? This is referral, right? This is referral. As in, you ate a sandwich, somebody saw the sandwich. It's basically word of mouth, typical, traditional, classical word of mouth advertising. Somebody saw you eating the sandwich by itself, you know, is the marketing and advertising. So you sort of try it, you have it, you like it, and you say, "Wow, I'll try it out." In this model, the model is growing organically completely, right? She's not spending any money at all, and she's getting customer. And you know, if she does this across, you know, why risk everything by concentrating your exposure to Habib? You know, she does the same thing at IBA, she does the same thing at Sir Syed, she does the same thing at Indus, right? So you got like 5 or 6, same thing at Zabis. 5-6 campus उसने पकड़ लिए. हर campus में 10 लोगों ने order ले लिया. As long as a campus has one user, one buyer, what is she doing? She is essentially infecting the population, right? As long as you have one person who's carrying the infection, eventually the entire pool will get infected. Ji Haris.
Sure, but as you said that the faculty is also involved, so we assume that the admin staff is also involved, and you know, contacts forming. Maybe it's not just limited to the offices. Maybe it could spread to not limited to universities, but it could spread across offices, maybe in lunch hours and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's the best case scenario. हम तो worst case की बात कर रहे हैं. It's just a student population. Let's say you're just targeting the student population. ठीक है? अच्छा, now, so this is referral mode. This is organic growth. Nothing is being spent to grow this. Now let's say, you know, this cousin of yours who's doing this test kitchen hires another 4 chefs. She has the capacity and she thinks she can do 10,000 sandwiches a day, right? But now she needs the volume. She wants the business. So now what does she do? So let's say by this time she has about 100 customers at Habib. So she says, you know what I'm going to do? If you sign up if you send me your WhatsApp number or sign up to my sheet, I'm going to run a test tasting at Habib, and I'll give you half a sandwich for free. So I'll tell you, is then test tasting is then aap aa jaye, come to the campus on that day, and we'll offer you half a sandwich, and we will give you the choice to pick anything from this inventory of our 100 sandwiches. And this is completely free. Just try it. Just try it. So if a sandwich is sold for 250, and let's say the cost of a sandwich, a full sandwich is 100 rupees, right? That's the cost to her. She sells it for 250, cost is 100. So half a sandwich की cost क्या होगी? 50 रुपए होगी. यही होगी ना? And she's very confident. She's very confident that once you try the sandwich, you're not going to go back. But let's also assume that only 50% of the people who try the sandwich sort of sign up and become customers of this test kitchen Wonder Woman, right? So then what happens? You're saying 50 rupees you spend on each customer. For every 2 customers who test the sandwich, which is 100 rupees, 1 becomes a customer for life. Which means that the cost of acquiring a customer is how much? Is 100. Does that make sense? 2 sandwich आप खर्च करेंगे तो आपको 1 customer मिलेगा. So अब हमने क्या किया? This is a trial or a demo. Test है ना आपने? Tasting drive चलाई ना आपने? Now she may just as well, put up an Instagram page or a Facebook page called Amazing Test Kitchen Sandwiches from Amazing Test Kitchen Chef. And she might run a campaign on Facebook or Insta or Twitter for that matter. Again, focusing completely on the student population. And in this case, there is again a cost, and that cost is your advertising cost. And that may be on a per impression basis, per 1,000 impression basis, per click basis, per engagement basis. Could be multiple factors, multiple drivers, but that's also a cost. So referral ho gaya, advertising ho gaya. And then you got 2 more, which is SEO and alternate channels. So for example, in Maya's case, if you search for baby clothing in Karachi, if you search for baby shoes in Karachi, if you search for school supplies for kindergarten children in Karachi, in all of these instances, if Altamash and Sabine have done their job well, they should be able to dominate these results for these queries, and that becomes SEO. So iski bhi cost hai. Here there are alternate channels, there are other non-traditional, non-conventional channels that you can try to sell your sandwiches. So you get a sense of what customer acquisition cost is. ये तो आपकी customer acquisition cost आ गई. अब lifetime value आ जाता है. What is the lifetime value of Maya's customers? And this is a function of a couple of factors. The pehla factor is length of relationship. So if you go back to the category, right, we said 0 to 12, that's the age group. Which basically means कि अगर ये 12 साल तक माया से कपड़े खरीदती रहती हैं, so the length of the relationship would be about 12 years. Then think in terms of orders per year. So there are 3 seasons in the year. There is spring, which is now. There is winter, which was a few months before. Actually, there are 4. There is summer, and then there is fall. So ये 4 seasons हैं आपके पास. But 4 seasons में आमतौर पे we buy clothes maybe about 3 times a year, which basically corresponds to the summer vacations and the 2 terms, the start of the January term and the start of the August term, right? So हम साल में 3 दफा कपड़े खरीदते हैं. So let's say it's 3 orders per year, and we can always come back and revisit this. Questions. Yes, that's true. Alright, Ji. So then the typical order size is about, that's the number that we looked at earlier, which is about 3,000. And then your contribution margin per order is about 900. So if I do this math, I'm saying 12 years into how many orders? 3 orders. into, what's the contribution margin? About 900. So 9 into, यार इसको 10 कर लेते हैं, 10 is going to make the math easier. 9 into 3 is 27, and 27, so this is about how much? 27,000 रुपए. The lifetime value of each Maya customer is about 27,000. Do you follow the math?
So wouldn't you also account that a mother usually has more than one child also?
Yes, that's a factor, but that's another 12 years. अभी हमने assume किया जैसे एक अम्मा का एक ही बच्चे के लिए खरीद रही हैं. So ये 10 comes from here, orders per year comes from here, contribution margin comes from here, and this gives us the lifetime value of a customer. So that's 20. Now what does this mean? What does this 27,000 represent? Yeah, that's a good point. What about inflation? So there are multiple other factors, multiple other adjustments that you have to make to this model. It's not a perfect model. So पहला सवाल तो ये कि आपकी assumption ये कि ये जो customer आप कह रहे हैं 10 साल रहेगा और 3 orders देगा, you're saying every customer is going to be a repeat customer. That's not true. Not all customers are going to come back. So the first thing you have to adjust for is probability of repeat orders. Some customers will come back, some customers will not come back, which means that this number will reduce. So let's say the number is 10%. If the number is 10%, then how does the math change? What was the math? 10 into 3 into 900, which gave us 27,000 into 10%, right? Which is this 10% into 0.1, which then gives you 2,700. So now the lifetime value is no longer 27,000, it's 2,700. What if it's not 10%? What if it's 50%? If it's 50%, then this would become 13,500, because this 0.1 would become 0.5. Does that make sense? Are you following what's happening? Here there is time value of money. So time value of money is basically, the 900 rupees that you receive today versus the 900 that you're going to receive 10 years from now are not the same. This is worth a lot less. This is worth a lot more. So what you receive now, what you receive today, what you receive in the near future is worth a lot more than what you're going to receive later at some other point in time in the future. All right? Make sense? Okay, then there is order size growth and shrinkage, which basically means that some mothers may just try out a default order at 3,000, but the next time they order, they're so happy with Maya that they might order 6,000 or 4,000, or they're so upset that they may not come back at all, or they may only try just 1,000. So orders may grow or shrink depending on the experience of your customers with Maya, with inflation, with growth, with multiple other factors. Ji Haris, sawal?
Yes, sir. You said regarding time value of money, but we kept the price for the sandwiches constant. What if the price of the sandwiches changed? Either they could, they could decrease. So how will you account for that in the future?
पैसे अभी मिल गया ना मुझे, and I'm only charging you for a week. So I'm saying, I've done this sandwich, so I've got the 250 rupee line at 1250 a week, and then I may want to if I want to upend it. For example, I give you let me see, Kobe beef sandwiches. But the Kobe beef sandwich is not going to be 1250 a week. The variation, the Kobe beef with portobello mushrooms, right? And with some exotic variation of interesting sauce. will be, let me see, 5 sandwiches is going to be about 5,000 rupees a week. Now, this is no longer aimed at students. This is for people who are into and are willing to pay for fine cuisine. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So you can keep the old line, the traditional line, at one price level, and then you can add premier lines or premium lines at different price levels for different segments of the market. But that's going to be again a function of how or where you want to expand and how or where you want to go with your business. जी, any other question और सवालात? जी हारिस.
Sir, but that's for one single line of sandwiches. Maybe if I change it or if I advance to that. But what if I have different lines of products and each has different types of customers? So won't that complicate things a bit?
Yes, it would. So हम कोशिश ये करते हैं, we normally try to focus on a set number of segments and a set number of products. Otherwise, what happens is that you would get distracted. So you, as an organization, you're geared to serve. For example, as an organization, you might be geared to serve students, and students, both in terms of demographics, in terms of age, in terms of paying capacity, in terms of preferences, in terms of taste, in terms of loyalty, are very different. Let's say they're very, very different from 50-year-old fat, overweight professors like me. I'm a different market. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So जब आप मुझसे बात करेंगे, you're sort of selling and pitching to me, आपके लिए क्या चीज़ important है? आपके लिए price important है, convenience important है, taste important है, quality important है. But I may have bridges in my teeth, which basically means I can't even chew beef. तो मुझे हर sandwich मलाई sandwich चाहिए. If it has anything that needs to be sort of worked on, I can't eat it. So when she sells to me, she's going to sell to me depending on basing it on her assessment of what my persona and profile is. You remember Riz and Abby from our persona session? Okay. Haris, are we good? Did that answer your question?
Yes, it answers my question.
Alright. Achha, फिर there are frictional costs. So again, back to Maya. What are frictional costs? Frictional costs are, यहाँ पे क्या आएगा? Refunds, exchanges, returns, right? Complaints, and then most importantly, shrinkage and theft. I send you the package from my perspective, and somewhere in the middle in the chain, it got stolen, disappeared, or it landed at the customer but it was empty, or it didn't have what you'd send, it had something else. So there's that also. So you have to sort of make all of these adjustments, which basically means that if you do the math, and now we're getting into tricky territory, the math has multiple factors and multiple drivers. And what you want to focus on, a few things. You want to focus on, first, this is item number 1. ये क्या दिखा रहा है? What is this table showing? This table is saying for a range of order frequencies. So if order frequencies goes from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 and 5, and the length of customer life in years. So if the customer stays with, for example, if the customer only orders, and this is with respect to Maya, if the customer only orders one order a year and only stays for 1 year, the lifetime value of that customer is 910, which means in this specific instance, in this specific model, the contribution margin is 910. Does that make sense? Because why? Because length of relationship is 1, number of orders a year is 1, contribution margin is 1, so ये 910 हो गया. एक ही कस्टमर है ना, एक ही ऑर्डर है, तो इसमें रिटेंशन का सवाल ही पैदा नहीं हो रहा. और अगर if you do 2, if you say it'll stay for 2 years, the customer will stay for 2 years, that basically means you have 2 orders. So 2 orders के केस में your actual number should be 1820, but the number that you're seeing here is 1120. And why is that? Because we're saying we've adjusted it for retention. Only 30% of the customers stay back. Go to 4 years, it becomes 1540. If you go to 12 years, it becomes 3220. If you go to 12 years and 5 orders a year, it becomes 13,300. Does that make sense? That's what a table says. That's what a table is trying to show you. So now the question to you is, customer ko lana is a mushkil kaam. That's one of the things that we sort of said from day one. Getting a customer to try a new product, to try a new idea, getting a customer to dump whatever they're using and come over to your side is a difficult task. And it takes a lot of effort. So should you focus on customers that have a lifetime value of 910 rupees? Should you focus on customers that have a lifetime value of 910 rupees? Or should you focus on customers that have a lifetime value of 13,300 rupees? What do you think? Is this better or is this better? Haris, why do you say 910? Why would you focus on customers that only have a lifetime value of 910? Okay. No, that's fine. That I understand. What I was saying was that, that money is different and this money is different. But इसमें 13,300 में ये already शामिल है.
And 30,300 well.
Okay, all right. Okay. So this is at 30% retention, right? Now, let's say if you reduce the retention, if you say, no, my customer experience is not that great, people are not happy, they're upset, they want to come back, they're actually angry, and my retention drops to 15%. What happens with that 13,300? It becomes 7,000. This becomes 805. Does that make sense? So retention is also a factor. So now, this is the real test, right? This is the test that will show whether you are paying attention, whether you understand the real concept, and whether you're able to sort of internalize and apply what we've been speaking about for the last 4 classes. These are the 4 businesses, right, that we are going to look at. The first is financetrainingcourse.com. This is the site that we've spoken about multiple times in the past. Remember? FTC, the online training site.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So at FTC, the order size is $125. The gross margin is 90%. Cost of goods sold is 10%. The contribution margin, I've sort of simplified the math. The contribution margin is 90%, which basically means the contribution margin in dollar terms is about $112 on an order of $125. But the repeat customers are 35 and the order frequency is 2. So one customer generally buys 2 things a year, and a typical shelf life of a customer is about 2 years. So for some it will be a year, for some it will be 2 years, for some it will be 3 years, average is about 2 years. Total orders over the life of a customer are about 4. And this becomes business number 1 or A. Then there is Maya, our friend Maya that we already discussed. So order size is about $30, gross margin 60%, cost of goods sold 40%. Their contribution margin is about $18. Okay. And in terms of repeat customers, retention, it's about 30%. Order frequency is 2, but the length of the relationship is 11 years. So they do about 22 orders, and this becomes B. Then there is a fresh produce company, right? And they sell, they ship and sell fresh fruits, fresh veggies, dry fruit, consumable, perishable goods, lots of stuff, right? So this is like, think of it as your online Kiryana store plus Sabzi Mandi plus Phalwala in one place. You just go to the site, sort of like Mandi Express. So their average order size is very close to Maya's, it's about $25. But their gross margin is lower, it's about 30%. Their cost of goods sold is higher. So they make only $7.50 per order, right? But there are lots of issues because it's the produce business, right? Because there are challenges with आपने राइडर के साथ भेजा माल and नीचे टमाटर रखे हुए थे, उसके ऊपर उसने जो है आलू रख दिए, तो by the time the tomatoes got to the customer, the tomatoes का टमाटो सूप बन चुका था और आलू जो है लाल हो चुके थे. तो कस्टमर से ये क्या किया आपने? And the customer said, I'm never ever going to order from you again, right? तो order frequency ज़रा ज़्यादा है compared to these guys, but because of the customer service experience there are challenges. And then the customer shelf life is about 2 years, and the total orders over the life is about 12 orders, and this becomes business number C. ठीक है जी. फिर there is the same business, so produce A, fresh produce A, called business C, gets taken over by a team that sort of revamps the business end to end and improves everything. So the order size remains the same, gross margin remains the same, cost of goods sold remains the same, but what they fix is they fix the customer experience. And because they fix the customer experience, retention goes through the roof. They fix the UI, which is the user interface. And because they fix the UI, the order frequency goes through the roof. And because customers are happy, and because they're ordering on a frequent basis, and because it's sort of become a central part of their life, the customer life also goes through. So rather than 6 orders a year, which is basically an order every 2 months, they go to an order every 2 weeks. And rather than a customer staying with them for 2 years, customer stays with them for 6 years. So their number of orders is about 144. So A, B, C and D. ये 4 businesses बन गए आपके पास. Which one do you prefer? Which one would you rather have or own? So let's do a quick vote. And again, this is a final attendance. So I'm going to use this as your last and final attendance call. Next 30 seconds, put down A, B, C or D. Where if you're a FTC fan, it's A. I know some of you already done that. If you're a Maya fan, it's B. If it's produce A, it's C. If it's produce B, it's D. We have 38 people in the class. You should all be able to sort of cover that. And the winner based on this is Haji. So those who voted for B, please explain. Walk me through your thought process. So D wins, but I want to be very clear. B represents produce B. I think there might be some confusion because of the term. Okay, all right. So now let's take a look at this again. So I'll remove the calculation. And the question now is, how do you scale, right? That's the question we're trying to answer. We're trying to figure out, when it comes to scaling, how does scale work? So, यही थी ना आपकी slide. This is the slide that we're looking at with respect to unit economics. There are only a handful of ways in which you can scale, right? You can scale by increasing the order size. So scale basically means you want more revenues, not necessarily profit, but you want certainly more customers and more revenue. So one way of getting more revenue is to just increase the order size. Don't sell something which is worth $25, sell something which is $125. Another way of winning is to improve, or scaling is to improve your gross margin, right? So that also improves profitability. A third way is to reduce your cost of goods sold, which is basically the inverse of this. So it's the different way of saying the same thing. Third way is to increase retention. Getting a customer is difficult. Once you get a customer, if you can retain that customer, you do well. A fourth way is to increase the order frequency. If the customer is only buying once every 2 months, figure out some way of letting him buy once every week, once every 2 weeks, or once every 3 weeks. And final way is to increase the customer shelf life. So these are all ways of scaling. But now you think in terms of the impact of these models and these strategies on the value of a business. Ali, you had a question or a comment? Ali Hamza?
Wanted to say that these techniques also kind of depend on the kind of business this is. So if a business is, let's say, like a grocery store, then their customer repeat would be much higher than a business that's a clothing store.
Yeah.
So
Yes, I agree.
no one way to do this, right?
Yeah. No, I'm you're saying there are multiple ways. We're just identifying the strategies that we're aware of. See, so we're saying order size बढ़ा लें, increase the order size, that's one. Increase your margin, that's two. Increase your customer retention, that's three. Increase the order frequency, that's four. Increase the amount of time you retain a customer, and that's five, right? So 5 models. So now for a second, let's assume that I have all 3 of these businesses have 1,000 customers each. And let's also assume that somehow the value of a business is linked to the lifetime value of their customers. So for example, in the case of FTC, if FTC has 1,000 customers, its value is 158,000. If FTC had 10,000 customers, its value would be $1.58 million. Does that make sense? Does this logic make sense? Yeah, okay, all right. So for Maya, if Maya has 1,000 customers, Maya's value is 119,000. If Maya had 10,000 customers, Maya's value would be $1.19 million. Then there's Produce A. Produce A has 1,000 customers and Produce A only gets to $18,000 in value. You can clearly see the difference, right? But when we come to Produce B or Business D from the last slide at 972, and we just round this up to 1,000, this is worth $1 million right off the bat. If it had 10,000 customers, it would be worth $10 million. And once again, which one would you invest in? If this is A, this is B, this is C, and this is D, D is the right choice. Now, why is D so valuable? The reason why D is so valuable is multiple reasons. One is, it has very respectable 30% gross margin, 30% contribution margin is not easy. It's difficult. It takes time. It takes effort, right? That's one. 90% retention of customers, getting repeat customers to come back again and again is next to impossible. You have to be like batshit crazy to get to a stage of service quality where customers come back again and again just for the service quality. Typical business in Pakistan cannot even think about having 90% retention. No, you don't have to be Google. You can do it, but you have to be sort of devoted to customer quality, right? Then there is order frequency. Order frequency is basically a function of user experience. So if you get the UX and the UI right, if you get these two elements right, you would find that customers come back. It's also a function of what business you're in, right? So for example, if you have world-class service and you do phenomenal work, but you sell cars, most customers are only going to buy a car once in 5 years. Some will buy a car once in 10 years. New cars, right? So, even if you have world-class quality, world-class product, world-class everything, the nature of the business is such that your customers are only going to come back and buy a car once in 5 years. And that's it. But books are different. I can go buy a book maybe once a month, maybe once in 2 months, certainly once in 3 months, right? And then shelf life is a function of does your product grow with the character arc of your customer, which is where we go back to the customer persona discussion. So the gist and what I'm trying to sort of emphasize, and now if you were not paying attention, this is the heart of the entire lecture. I want you to listen to what I'm going to tell you now, because this is the essence of what we've done over the last 4 weeks. So it's taken me 11 years to get FTC to a point where it has 1,000 customers and it's worth $158,000. Does that make sense? if I'd spent the same 11 years working on a business which was similar to business D, which is produce D, I would have a business which would be worth $1 million at 1,000 customers. If I had 10,000 customers, if let's say FTC for a second had 10,000 customers, right? Or by some magical act of God, I could grow my 1,000 customers to 10,000 customers in 1 year. 12 years later, I would have a business that would be worth $1.58 million. But if by the same act of God, I could grow these 1,000 customers on D, on produce B to 10,000, I would have a business would be worth $10 million. Does that mean anything to you? What's your takeaway from it?
So returning customers are crucial to a business?
Two elements: returning customers and order frequency. If you're given a choice between a business that has lower customer retention and lower customer order frequency and lower customer shelf life, if you're given a choice between two businesses where you have higher customer retention, higher order frequency, higher shelf life, opt for the businesses that have this. Because it's going to take, if you remember from a session on bad ideas, it's going to take 10 to 12 years for you to make the business work in any case. 10 से 12 साल तो कहीं नहीं गए. You're going to spend that time. So if you're going to spend 10 to 12 years, might as well spend those 10 to 12 years on building something which is worthwhile. Something which is worth at $10 million about 10 times more worthy than FTC. And here's the part. This is the reason why unit economics is so important. As engineers, as builders, as makers, we don't think about scale. We don't think about how the business is going to grow. We don't think about the math that matters. The math that matters tells us that idea selection is not enough. You might build a big moat around your business, right? But if you're suffering from the crucial flaw that your customer is only going to buy once in 5 years, your customer is only going to be with you for a year, your customer is not going to be retained, so your retention is, about 10% or so. Despite the fact that from an idea point of view, this is a great business, from a structure point of view, you are going to be handicapped. You will have issues scaling and growing. So when you pick ideas, especially ideas that you want to work on, especially ideas that you want to work on in the real life, it's very important for you to understand the underlying unit economics. Does that make sense? I said this to the class earlier in the morning. I said, if somebody had sat me down 30 years ago and explained this to me, just as I've explained it to you, there's a reasonable chance that I won't be teaching this course. I wouldn't be teaching this course at Habib. I would be on my own private island somewhere in the south of Pacific, ruling my own kingdom. I won't be here teaching. Does that make sense? DRS, sorry.
Sure, except for the financial, if you keep the financials at one side, you also need the drive to continue doing this, and you also need to keep up with the market, keep up with the competition. So if you don't really like doing what you do, if you're not really passionate about it, even if you have established a structure, then that would be difficult for you to continue. For a customer to retain, to be in your business for 10 years, that business has to stand for 10 years. But if you're not again to it, then what's the point?
No, all of that is given. So the passion, the interest, the desire to continue to sort of make things work, all of that is given. But I'm saying, given a choice of ideas that you're interested in working on, it is important for you to look at ideas. So I think the essence of the argument that we've said, right? What we're saying is, how can you grow a business year on year? You can grow a business by increasing the orders per month. Okay? You can grow a business by increasing the order size per month. You can grow a business by increasing the contribution margin per month, right? ये तीन चीजें समझ में आती हैं हमारे पास. We understand this. But what's the easiest way of growing orders per month? Easiest way of growing orders per month is to get repeat customers. Customers who've already bought from you. जी हारिस बोलिए.
Sir, so for example, if I like cars and I'm passionate about cars and I want to do something in that industry, so instead of selling cars, I sell car parts. So I get more customer attention, I get more, then people will actually look at the service quality and what kind of parts I'm providing, and they would come often rather than, they're just buying the cars.
You know where my father goes to buy parts for the Gadi when the Gadi goes to the garage?
Some local mechanic?
No, he goes to this old shop right next to Mama Parsi High School, opposite Plaza. It's a very small shop. It's not a huge shop. It's a very small shop. But he's been going there now for about 50 years. 50 saal purani dukaan hai wo. And now that he's shown it to me, when I need to buy a car part, that's where I'm going to go to. So there's also a generational transfer. So yes, you're right. But I think then the big question that comes is, there is also issues of moats and filters that we spoke about earlier. Can everybody else also put up a shop right next to you on selling car parts? And that's the deal with Plaza, right? Plaza mein to har dafa dukaan of parts and parts and parts. You also have to think in terms of, as I said earlier, okay, I wouldn't be here teaching. That's not true. I actually enjoy teaching. If I look at the last 30 years of my life, the one consistent thing that's given me an enormous amount of satisfaction and pleasure is teaching. So irrespective of whether I'm here or I'm Fiji, I'm in South Pacific, or I'm sort of in Antarctica, I think the one thing I'm sure of doing is I will be teaching. So I may not be working as an actuary, I may not be running FTC, but teaching is something which is very, very central to my being. And I think that's the second part. When we speak about FTC, all I need to do is I understand the teaching piece, I understand the fact that the business works, I understand the fact how the model works. What I'm missing is two things. I need to figure out a model where customer retention increases and the order frequency increases. If I can fix these two pieces, if I can fix the customer retention piece and I can fix the order frequency, right? So for example, rather than 35%, let's say it's 100%. And let's say order frequency of 2, order frequency becomes 4. What happens to the valuation? This 158 would become 1580. Just by, no, won't make it 15, by 3. From 35 it goes to 100. So this would become 160, this will become 480. Plus the fact the order frequency has gone up. So that's another 200. So that'll become maybe about 600. So it still won't be as valuable as produce B, but it'll certainly be more valuable. Right? Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir, it does.
So Ab, I think the whole purpose of this exercise of sort of walking you through this process was to give you a sense of how important understanding the math that matters is. The tech stack matters, the engineering matters, the making and building matters, the idea selection matters, the moat matters. But if you don't understand the unit economics, if you don't understand the relationship between this and scale, then you are going to run into trouble. And if you do, right? So, if you had explained this to me 30 years ago, I would have made very different choices in terms of the business and the ideas and the concepts and the teams I chose to work with. I may have done things differently. And a large part of, we had this discussion in the class earlier in the morning where we spoke about luck. So intellect matters, ethics matters, ideas matters, commitment matters, intelligence matters, all of these factors matter, but luck matters a great deal more. However, luck is also a function of the choices and the paths you've taken. So if you sort of on a path where the margins are significantly higher, where the probability of success is significantly higher, then luck is more likely to favor you. And if you're on a path where the probability of success is lower, the margins are lower, the value is lower, then one small mistake and you're done. Game's over. Okay? Make sense? Yes, no, maybe? Ji Haris.
Yes, sir.
All right, questions. I know we are over time. Just want to quickly check. अगर आपके सवालात हैं, अगर आपके सवालात नहीं हैं, not a problem. I know that some of you have classes to attend or places to be. I'm going to stay back for 10 more minutes and I'll take any more questions. Those of you who want to run can run away. जी खुबैर.
सर वो आप LRB का फॉर्मूला वापस से दिखा सकते हैं, उसके अंदर थोड़ी कंफ्यूजन हो रही थी मुझे.
LTV वाला?
Yeah, LTV.
This one? ये वाली sheet?
नहीं, वो पहले वाली जिसके अंदर you had order frequency as well.
This one?
This one, yes. I don't remember the formula. The exact formula.
So हमारा formula जो हमने discuss किया था वो हमने यहाँ discuss किया था, right? So अच्छा, so two things. एक तो if you go to Founder Puzzles and you look at chapter 2, which is where the Maya case is, there's a full discussion there on it. Okay? The formula that we've presented here for lifetime value is a very simplified, crude approximation. It's not a correct formula, it's a formula that we use for a basic rule of thumb calculation. And what we did was we said LTV from a component point of view, actually there's a sheet where we did that, there we go, is length of relationship, orders per year, order size, and contribution margin. So if I bring this back here, we're saying if length of relationship is 10 years, in Maya's case, and order frequency is 2 orders per year, so that's 2 orders per year, and the contribution margin is 900 rupees per order, and the probability of retention is 30%. Then when you multiply all of these factors, you get 10 into 2 is 20, into 900 is 18,000, into 30% is 16 and is 5,400. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, but the assumption here is that this 30% means that once a customer comes back, he's going to stay for life. We're not evaluating the retention every year. We're simply saying once a customer comes back, he's going to stay with us for the remaining part of his life with us, which is about 10 years. There would be other variations where you would say, no, we're going to evaluate it every year. So for example, Maya says that once we have a customer who's placed a second order, customers who place second orders are likely to stay and place 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 orders a year. They sort of graduate and grow. But if a customer doesn't place a second order, then that customer is not coming back. And their take is that number for us is about 30 to 40%. Could be 50%, could be 60%, but somewhere in that range. Okay?
So some sort of Markovian model.
No, it's not a Markovian model. If you, from a pure probability point of view, what you really want to do is you want to build a survival model, right? The survival model says I have 1,000 customers at the start of the year. And of these 1,000 customers, at 30%, 700 customers will go away. So at the end of the first year, I will have 300 old customers left. And I will have 1,000 new customers. And so of the 300 that's left, let's say the entire 100% will stay. So that's 300 customers. And of the 1,000 who've come in, 700 will go away at the end of the second year. So I'll then be left with 600 old customers at the end of the second year and 1,000 new customers from the third year. Does that make sense?
Yes.
It'll be like a cohort-based model. You'll basically sort of build a grid like this. They'll simply say, ye customer is 1 saal purana, this is 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old. And then these are the lives or the orders, right? So it'll be sort of like a triangle of this sort, where you'll have numbers here, but you'll have zeros here. Does that make sense? That's what I mean
Yes,
by...
but
No, they're going to be different because in the table that we've used here, I think the contribution margin and the order size and the probabilities are possibly different. So you have to go look at the book.
okay.
The assumption that I've used in these calculations are 10 to 930. I don't think that's the assumption that's been used. Just remember, produce B, model D, driven by customer retention and order frequency. A business that is able to retain more customers and convince those customers to order more, despite the fact that it has a significantly smaller order size, is likely to be a lot more valuable than a business that loses customers and doesn't convince them, doesn't give them an incentive or a motive or a reason or a rationale for ordering more frequently. Okay? So with that, we'll close for today. I hope you guys have a great week. Enjoy the weekend, and I'll inshallah see you next week. Hafiz.